Hi, everyone. Various artists here from the MyLifeInConcert.com podcast and blog, and starting a new offshoot series called My Life in Conversation. Today, I am pleased to be speaking with Robert Margouleff. Now, Robert is one of the true pioneers of electronic music as one half of one of the very first electronic duos, Tonto's Expanding Headband with Malcolm Cecil. He's also a celebrated producer and engineer who, along with Cecil, played a crucial role in shaping the sound and feel of Stevie Wonder's classic and highly influential run of albums from 1972's Music of My Mind through 1974's Fulfilling This First Finale. And he's also produced and worked with many other celebrated musicians and artists, including Devo, Billy Preston, and also produced another early electronic pioneer, Lothar and the Hand People. However, today I'm going to be talking to Robert about his role as film producer, as he produced one of the all-time classic cult movies, 1972's Ciao, Manhattan, starring former 60s Warhol superstar Edie Sedgwick. And I know this is a film, in my younger years, we discovered this in the 80s, and seeing this film with my friends over and over was a big part of my younger life. So this film's been in my life my whole life, well, since my 20s. Now, as Ciao Manhattan approaches its 50th anniversary, Robert once again is involved in an Edie-themed project, an upcoming animated short by director Kinga Syrek called Conversations with Edie Sedgwick. I'll be talking to Robert today about Ciao Manhattan, its making and its legacy, and also talk about this new project, Conversations with Edie Sedgwick. Thank you very much, Robert, for taking the time to speak with me today. Very appreciated.
Very welcome. The Edie Sedgwick project, actually the short subject will be screened in Santa Barbara Film Festival in a few weeks, and the actual animated piece, which is 14 minutes long, I'm mixing this afternoon, it's called Too Late, is the name of the actual animated project.
Oh, okay. So the actual name is Too Late. Now, for people, we'll be talking about this more later too. If people are interested in more, there's also a Facebook page about the project Conversations with Edie Sedgwick that you can check into. So I'd like to start by talking about Ciao Manhattan. And Edie herself, how did you first come to know Edie, and what were your impressions of her?
Well, basically, I was living in the East Village. I had just returned from living in Germany, strangely enough. I got out of the service. I was stationed in Germany just before Vietnam. I was lucky to have gotten away with getting stationed in Germany and not being sent to Vietnam. And I was trained as a combat photographer, and I was very much into film and video, and really schooled in documentary film courtesy of the U.S. government. And I learned all the production cameras, and after I got out of the service, I stayed in Germany for a minute and got involved in the film business, and then came back to the States. My parents wanted me to come back, and I had friends here. And I settled in the East Village and found a place to screen movies. I was going to import feature films, and short subjects from Germany, strangely enough. Because they made beautiful short subject projects. That didn't work out really very well, but what did work out was that I ended up living in a nest of creatives. Across the street from my house was the beginning of the Fillmore East with the opening act was Jefferson Airplane, and across the street was La Mama Off-Broadway Theater. And in so doing, I started to meet a lot of people from the factory. And I fancied myself a filmmaker, first and foremost. And my parents gave me a lot of support because they said, oh, my son, the film producer, big deal. You know, I was going to be the film mogul in the family. And I ended up moving up to 47th Street to a little insert stage. And my original thought was, well, I'll make a few porno movies, soft porn. In those days, they had a whole bunch of these soft porn theaters on 12th Avenue.
Yeah.
And all the new filmmakers went to Shelley Wilson, who owned them all. She was a big fat Greek lady with her hair going in every direction, chain smoker, cigarette butts all over the place. and we would get $10,000, and we could make a soft porn movie for one of her movie houses. And in the process, learn a lot about filmmaking, because who would hire somebody, a youngster in the major film companies to work? Everyone, was union. You couldn't get in. There was no way into the majors to get, employment and stuff. So I thought, well, we'll make a low-budget movie, and I'll get my training wheels. It was at that time that I ended up in a strange coffee house one night in the West Village, and I met a guy named Chuck Wine. Chuck was Andy's lieutenant, basically, consigliere, basically. And when he found out that I had a film studio, he said, well, come on, let's go. I'll help you. We'll make some movies together. So I had a film project in mind. I was taking it to Chile for $10,000, soft porn movie. Well, that never happened. But what did happen was I ended up meeting Edie. And originally I was supposed to meet Suzanne Bottomley. And that's the reason in Ciao, Manhattan that Edie is called Susan in the movie.
Ah.
The reason Edie's called Susan in the movie was originally we were going to get Suzanne Bottomley to play that role. And when Suzanne Bottomley's father, who was a big philanthropy and big wheel in the New York social scene, heard that his daughter was going to be in the soft porn movie, he went bonkers and absolutely forbade Susan to participate. So Chuck and a guy named David Weisman brought Edie to my office. And she had never made a feature film. As a matter of fact, Ciao, Manhattan was the only feature she ever made.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. So basically, I met her by default. And my parents were very enamored with the whole thing that was going on, and gave me some financial support. And I got a few other people together, and we ended up with a $35,000 budget, which in the end turned out to be $135,000, and nearly broke my parents and me, and ended up, it was a major plane crash at the end of that, which was at the end of the black and white footage shooting in New York. It was at that time that I discovered the synthesizer during the shooting of Ciao, Manhattan. And I ran straight into the arms of electronica. Basically, I was responsible for shooting all of the black and white footage and all that stuff that was produced in New York. The color footage was shot in California by David Weisman, who we fondly called Rocco. And I didn't much agree with very much of it, but by that time, it was years. I mean, this film went on for 6 or 7 years to get it together. David had this cockamamie thing with the swimming pool and Edie on the West Coast, and it turned into kind of a biblical of Edie. I came out and did the audio for it and stuff, but I was already starting to work in the studio with Richie Havens and using our synthesizer, and had just started in 74 working with Stevie Wonder. So I came out and did the audio, but the last half of the film, the color footage, was really in the hands of David and John Palmer, the cinematographer. I shot a lot of the stuff, the black and white stuff in New York, but I became very disconnected with the film. I was totally consumed with making records, or as they say in New York, making records. Yeah. I'm a big kid, I'll make you as famous as the Beatles.
Yeah.
So, but Edie became a big part of my life. My father was very enamored. He wanted to be in the film, and finally was in Ciao, Manhattan. He plays Mr. Verdecchio.
Yep.
And my mom sort of became the bookkeeper part of things for a minute. My few scenes, you can see her standing in the background. My mother was 4'10", a little lady clutching a big pocketbook with all her stuff in it, like crazy. And but they helped tremendously in getting the film started. But I ended up Edie, of course, got deeply with a lot of vitamin shots and a lot of drugs and Max's Kansas City and the underground in New York. And Edie ended up living at the Chelsea Hotel. And she was doing something that she shouldn't have been doing, and there was a fire at the Chelsea. And they rescued her, and she went to Bellevue for a while. And when she came out of Bellevue, she had burned both her hands. We used to call her the big Q-tip because she'd walk around with these bandaged hands. And she ended up moving into my apartment with me. And,
that must have been a lot of drama.
Oh, beyond drama. I hired a guy named Bobby Anderson to sort of look after her because she was helpless. Basically, she couldn't use her hands for a while. And she was in trouble by then. She had become very addicted to a variety of drugs and injectables and stuff. And I can remember her calling her father from my house. And her father just completely disowned her. You know, Edie came from a Brahmin family. So she, was used to living very high on the hog, but also her father in many ways really destroyed her. But I can remember the phone call in which he rejected her completely and said, "I'm not going to help you anymore."
Wow. There's a lot of dysfunction in her family.
Well, her two brothers committed suicide. So it was fuzzy. Her father, who was really an extremely domineering, overbearing father, and he isolated his family on this big ranch in Santa Barbara, and he even had a schoolhouse built on the property so he could go to school. They could go to school there. So she was very sort of managed and very suppressed artistically. She was very sensitive. She was a great illustrator. She had tremendous sense of style, as we all know, because now there are a lot of fashions that she worked on with Betsy Johnson back in the day, which are now very much in fashion again.
Yeah.
And here I am 50 years later making a movie about Ciao Manhattan and about Edie Sedgwick. So, I mean, what comes around goes around, I guess. But I lived with her for about a year and a half.
Wow.
Became close and friends. And I did all I could to help her. I tried to keep her sober enough to make appearances in Ciao Manhattan. But by the time the California footage rolled around, she was pretty hopeless. I wasn't directly involved with that, but I did try to maintain a semblance of balance and try to protect my investment basically as well. But it was a revelation. And we spent many a night at Max's Kansas City with Andy and all the other hangers-on and people. It was a contest to see who was going to fall next from drug addiction or overdose or something. It was very cruel and very sad in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. So with the original black and white footage, what was the concept for the original film?
The concept originally was, to create the lifestyle of a superstar living in New York. That's what it turned into. It originally was going to be a soft porn movie, but that we ditched that immediately when the factory denizens descended on my little film company, the Centaur Film Company. It's called Centaur Films. When they came on board, with a whole bunch of hangers-on and various official types: Chuck Wine, David Weissman, John Palmer, Gino Pizerchio, Ultraviolet, the Berlin Sisters, a whole bunch of people who were all expats of the factory, basically. Yeah. And when they came on board, it sort of started telling its own story. And being a documentary filmmaker, I sort of loved it because, that's what I was trying to do, is to make documentary movies. So using the camera as a tool of reportage more than trying to construct something. But we had a few constructed scenes, but basically we did a lot of improvisation. Paul America, for example, who is Susan's love interest in Ciao Manhattan, was going to, we had a scene set up at the Grand Central Station on the upper level. And Paul was supposed to come by in his sports car and pick Edie up coming out of the Grand Central Station. Well, he pulled up once and he went around the block with her and so on and so forth. We shot some footage. And then we were going to do it again, and Paul disappeared. And then the next thing we know, we found him in Allegan, Michigan in jail.
Yeah.
So he just kept going. So the film was very loosely structured around events that unfolded in front of us. In many cases, we didn't know what was going to happen the next day. Oh, there's the be-in. Let's shoot the be-in. Well, Margoloff, you've done combat footage in the helicopter. Let's rent the helicopter. And I jumped in there and shot all that aerial footage of Ciao Manhattan and all that stuff, and shot the be-in Central Park with Edie, right? We didn't plan that. It was based around events that were unfolding around us. And somehow it turned into this kind of strangely disjointed collage of events. And in the end, it really turned into the story of Edie's life and her fall into drug abuse, basically, and basically a really tragic story. And a sad tale and a lot of lessons to be learned from it. You know, we can always look at the superstar side of things and the glamour and the glitz. But once Andy turned his back on her, she crashed. It was the second big crash. The first rejection was her father, and the second big rejection was Andy finding another superstar, Jane Holzer, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. Well,
so that happened, she really went off the deep end. And I sort of witnessed the tail end of the comet, basically, with Edie. I loved her to death. I would do anything to help her. She was a beautiful human being, but she was very broken. She was very broken the day she walked in the door at Centaur.
Yeah. Because you were mentioning the be-in in Central Park. I believe that what I had read is that you only filmed her for a while and then she disappeared. Is that true?
Yeah, she went off and partied somewhere.
Yeah, because that's one of the. Go ahead.
You know, I was like gathering news. It was like being a news photographer.
Yeah.
The best thing was we had the Aeroflex 35 camera, which was a lightweight camera considering the day and age. We used the Mitchell camera and a lot of big heavy duty cameras. The Arri was basically a flexible camera, enough flexible that we could drag it around and do stuff on our own. So I had the training, you know, to really be able to use a camera like that. So it was very natural for me. We rented all the gear from a place called Gordon Audio and Video in New York, and they were very nice to us and left and gave us more gear than we deserved. But we ended up doing that, and then ended up starting to edit everything at my place on 47th Street, and that turned into a circus too.
Yeah, because this is something I'd always wondered about the film in both the black and white as well as the color footage, is how much was scripted and how much was just improvisation. A lot of it.
20% improvised, 20%, 25% scripted.
Oh, okay. So was it a case that, for instance, say with Central... Go ahead.
Go ahead. There's more structure in the color footage than there was in the black and white footage. Okay.
Because that's something I've also wondered. And also, too, with Edie as the character of Susan, you've explained why it's supposed to be Susan Bottomley initially. So that explains. I wondered, why did they have the character Susan and not Edie? Because I was wondering how much of the character of Susan was Edie and how much was it an invented character, as it were.
When she came on the scene, she was a powerful aura, powerful force spiritually. This is about Edie. The only remaining was the name Susan. Susan Bottomley never appeared, never came near the project but once when she met me. And that was it. Once her father put his foot down, it was over. Susan was out of the picture. And Edie looked just beautiful. I can remember her coming into my office, my little film mogul office on 47th Street. I was so struck by her. Beautiful, vivacious, magnetic, super intelligent. And I was very taken by her. And I thought her story of becoming a superstar in New York was more interesting than doing a porno movie for Shelley Wilson. So we turned into The Factory Part 2, basically. And it changed the course of my life. What happened for me with Ciao Manhattan is I discovered the Moog synthesizer.
Mm-hmm.
I was at a club in New York called, I think it was called the Electric Circus.
Mm-hmm.
And it opened, and they had a few Moog modules, very primitive ones, in their booth when they used it to make bleeping and looping sounds in between the music in the club at night. When I heard that, I said, this is something really special. This is the way I could use this synthesizer to score Ciao Manhattan. So there was a musician guy from the factory named Gino Pizerchio, and I got with him. Yeah. And he got very excited too. And I ended up buying a early Moog synthesizer from Bob Moog, who came down to Centaur. And we would fool around on the floor in there fixing the keyboards because they would drift and they were all very primitive. And at the same time, Wendy Carlos was living around the corner, working in the corner doing switched on Bach. And there were just a few of us that had synthesizers. And when I found the synthesizer, I found it because of Ciao Manhattan.
Interesting.
So, and when I found the synthesizer, that's all that really mattered to me. In the end, in New York, at the end of the thing, I had to close my place. I ran out of money. My parents cut me off. They thought the thing was turning into a circus, which it was. And my place was in a building where they had all these Jewish diamond brokers, and they all had long hair and beards. And I really couldn't tell the difference between my friends who had long hair and beards and all these Rebbe diamond dealers. And I would lean on the back of the elevator going down from the 5th floor. And I said, can it get any worse than this? It was like a nightmare. It got worse the next day. It was just completely out of control. It was very druggy. Dr. Feelgood was poking up everybody on Broadway on hair and going down to Washington, D.C. to poke up President Kennedy.
Really?
And vitamin shots.
Oh, yeah. So this is Dr. Robert? Yeah. He was poking Kennedy.
Yeah, I think he was, yeah.
Wow.
He poked I had a charge account at Dr. Robert's office. Yeah. So that was a real person.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm totally aware. One of the questions I was going to ask you is, the Dr. Robert in the movie, is that the real Dr. Robert or someone playing him?
That's someone playing him, but there was a real Dr. Robert, not named Dr. Robert. I don't want to go into names and stuff, but he had a practice, and everybody in town, all the tastemakers were all getting vitamin shots from Dr. Robert, from named Dr. Robert. That's not his name. That's the real name, I think, is Max Jacobson. But that was a real part of it. I had a charge account there, and it really turned into a hurricane of people acting out and hippiness, and it got really crazy. I finally ran out of money and had to close it, and David took over and moved the picture west and started shooting the stuff in California. Edie was still a big part of it. She wanted to be there. She wanted to be with it. So she ended up moving to California. I had moved to California by that time too, because I was working with Stevie Wonder by then in 74. And I was also already living in LA. And I did what I could to help, but I was no longer artistically involved with it, other than taking care of the audio recordings and stuff, because that's what I'm known for. But Ciao Manhattan is what turned me on to the Moog synthesizer. And when that whole thing folded up, the only thing I had left was me and my synthesizer. That was it. And I ended up through a variety of journeys. I ended up at Media Sound. Malcolm Cecil had my very high band called Tonto's Expanding Headband, which the name came to me in a peyote-fueled session a few nights before. And I said, I got the name for the band, Tonto's Expanding Headband. It was one synthesizer played by two people at the same time. That's a very interesting concept for a musical instrument. I mean, there's occasionally, Schumann and Bach and stuff wrote music for keyboard, for four-handed keyboard, but basically it was never really in pop music until the synthesizer that were really able to have one instrument played by more than one person at a time. There were numerous inputs into Tonto, so we were able to have Stevie, me, and Malcolm would play the synthesizer simultaneously, each having a certain part of the music. Yeah. So I was off doing that, and the show with Edie went on with David and John Palmer in the West Coast, and my effort became more peripheral. But the time where I was dominant in the thing was basically during the black and white footage in the New York space.
Nice. One question about, you mentioned the electronic community, Wendy Carlos, and what you were doing. Was there, in that early years of electronic music, which very few people were doing, it was also quite expensive to do that with this technology. Was there a community? Were you in touch with other people working with synthesizers, or was everyone kind of doing their own thing?
There were only a few people that owned synthesizers. When I got started, I looked like a mad U-boat captain, and I had a beautifully embroidered gold vest I used to love to wear at the sessions, and people would, I come into a session at Media Sound, for Crazy Daisy toilet paper, and the guy would say, "Hey, kid, can you make that computer sound a little bit more like a tablecloth?" It was really, I was really viewed as really somebody off the wall. I was an unreconstructed hippie back in those days, and I was really freed. Ciao just gave me the impetus to move forward into really what was my destiny.
Yeah.
And we changed the world
with
the music. But really was it was a quasi-documentary, basically, built originally around a premise, a fake premise that we created, but it rapidly changed and evolved into the story of Edie Sedgwick. And here I am 50 years later doing a film about Edie Sedgwick. So when you asked me about it, I was like, look, something's going on. I don't know what it is, but it's an interesting subject to come up at this time.
Well, Edie keeps coming up culturally through the years. I heard of her. I was always a big Warhol fan, but I didn't know of her until the book Edie, an American Biography, The Oral History from Gene Stein and George Plimpton. I know everyone in my circle in the summer of '82, we were all reading that book, and that's where I heard about Ciao Manhattan. And I got a hold of a video copy about a year later from a store, which I dubbed, sorry. We couldn't get one then, but everyone would come over to watch it. I wouldn't even lend the video out because there's no way to see this film. And we became very obsessed with Edie and that movie, which we would watch over and over because it's this incredible time capsule of a person, a place, a culture, and a time that there's nothing else like it that exists. So and she herself is very fascinating. So it seems like she keeps coming up in the culture. She really has something that each new generation finds something in her.
Well, I think also is the tragedy of her demise.
It's the Marilyn Monroe thing. Well, she always kind of was like an underground Marilyn Monroe, right down to her demise.
Yeah. I actually went to her wedding, and when she finally got married up in Santa Barbara, and She passed in bed. She passed away in bed with her husband. He woke up and she was gone, sleeping next to him.
Yeah. Because that also must have been very strange because the movie was in post-production at that time. How did that affect the finished product? Did it change at all what you had in mind to finish it because of her death?
David tried to figure out a way to close it out, and he did. It was just ongoing. It went on for 6 or 7 years. I mean, it was a biblical, you know.
Yeah.
It did really reflect the times. It really did sort of give us a chance to look at a beautifully unspoiled human being destroy herself. And I don't know, it's like, you know, when you go on the highway and there's a car accident, all the cars slow down to go like this.
Yeah.
To look fresh, you know. And I think a lot of the fascination that Edie has brought is the fact that she was so beautiful and tender and fragile and sensitive, and to watch her crash over a period of years is sort of spellbinding in a way, I guess. It's like looking at a car crash. You just got to slow down and look at it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you want to see who's mangled in the front seat. You know, it's a part of who we are, I guess. But I wish he had made it. You know, I really wish he had made it and found some solace. David passed away last year on Jewish High Holy Day. I went to the hospital to Cedars, and he had contracted some sort of a fever when he went to India, and he was in a coma. And when I went to see him on Yom Kippur Day, I brought him the yarmulke, and when I went into the room, he was gone. And I put the yarmulke on his head. And that summer, before that, David had fought a huge court battle, which was finally concluded about, I don't know, 3 or 4 months before he passed away. And I had to go up to Santa Barbara to wrest control of the rights to Edie's estate from her then husband, who was not really entitled to the rights. Weissman was really entitled to the rights, and we won a major court fight up there. And just recently, his estate now has full rights to the Edie Sedgwick story in Ciao, Manhattan.
Nice.
And here I am in the same breath, quite unrelatedly to that whole epic situation. Here I am, you know, too late, basically, doing this animated film from a really good filmmaker in Poland, Polish lady. It's all animated and hand-drawn, and really sort of tells Edie's story. Not so much about Ciao, Manhattan, but about her drug use, her hospitalizations, her kind of really strange relationship with her father, who really, in a sense, destroyed her and didn't raise her the right way. And in the end, he admitted it. He says,
really?
My children, it's in this animated piece, he says, my children, I agree that I did, you know, fuck up my kids.
That's incredible, because he sounds like a very narcissistic person, and they don't always have that sort of moment of clarity. So that's incredible he did.
It was a moment of clarity. He died in 1967 from pancreatic cancer. But, you know, the family owned the Southern Pacific Railroad, or the Santa Fe Railroad. They had a lot of money. And Edie grew up very sequestered on an estate in Santa Barbara. And it was totally isolated. And she never really, she came, and when she fell in with the underground in New York, it just slowly destroyed her. It was, and it was like watching a car, like I said, it was like watching a car crash in slow motion. There was very little I could do to save her. I didn't know how to save her. And
you can't sometimes.
And also, I mean, I was a part of it. I mean, I was getting vitamin shots. I was smoking as much weed as possible. I was using peyote. I used to get so high I couldn't see my feet. Now I've been sober for 8 years. I haven't touched anything in 8 years. I'm a member of the NA community. But, people say, well, they asked me, what happened? And I said, I only really got high once. And that was in 1958, the last year in high school, and I came down in 2012. I was part of that.
Yeah.
Okay. Not as deep. Somehow I managed to maintain a degree of operability. I mean, I went on to work with Stevie and do tons of electronic music. And in some ways, I guess my use of psychedelics kind of freed my head in a way. Otherwise, I would have become a furrier with my father and worked on 7th Avenue and 34th Street. But my destiny was somewhere else, and I was able to free myself because of I think in many ways because of my relationships and my use of psychedelics during the late 60s and early 70s. It sort of changed my point of view about life. So I really identified with it, but I was a part of it. And I just wasn't an observer looking in on it. I was on the inside looking out. And there's a lot to regret. I mean, had I known as much as I know now about recovery, I would have taken Edie and put her in recovery, but I didn't know about AA or any of that stuff. I didn't even know any of that kind of stuff existed. Otherwise, I would have gotten her there. But I was there and contained her and made sure she got fed and clothed and helped her and stuff. But she was just totally off the deep end when it came to drugs and alcohol. And there was nothing much I could do to change it. If you can't change someone, you can't say stop using or stop drinking unless they themselves want to do it. It's never going to happen. She never wanted to do it. She wanted to decide that escape.
Because that's one of the things I also wonder about the second half of the film in California. When you watch the New York footage in black and white, and then the footage from a few years later, on camera, she just seems totally out of it. And I've always wondered how much of that was acting, how much of that was just her at that time.
Well, when she was in Santa Barbara, her now husband was sort of a gopher, and he would smuggle a pint of vodka on the set every day. She would be drunk most of the time. And there was nothing we could do. I was no longer living with her. I was in California. I had my own stuff. I had left Ciao behind me, basically. But when I was on set with her, she was fucked up all the time. And she was a drug user and an alcoholic. And there's just no two ways about it. And the alcoholism had her hook, line, and sinker. There was no two ways about it. She finally had found a little happiness when she finally got married to the guy, but he was an enabler for her. And you can see the difference really in her. I think you notice the difference between the black and white and the color.
Oh, yeah. And that's why I was thought, is she acting, or is this her state had deteriorated? Because there's a clear difference between the black and white and the color footage.
She thought she was acting, but that was her camouflage. Oh, I'm acting on set, but she really was herself.
One question I've always wanted to ask, and it's always driven me not crazy, but it's occupied my mind since seeing the movie several times. When they go to California, they're shot at the bottom of the pool. Now I know you didn't shoot that, but she had that makeshift apartment at the bottom of the pool. And I've always thought, how would they do that over time? Like, what if it rained? Do you know if they had any problems with having a set at the bottom of a pool in the outdoors?
That was the inspiration. I thought it was rather lunatic when we did it, but it was cold at night, really cold. It was in the fall, I think. It was getting cold at night, and we used to have to bundle her up. She wanted to show off her new tits.
Yeah.
She wanted to show off her new because she was always rather flat, so she had, she had
Breast augmentation.
breast augmentation. She'd love to show them off.
Yeah.
But she'd hang out in the pool house at the end of the pool where it was warm. And then when we start shooting and having her in her apartment, which was that tent thing, she'd come out and Wesley Hayes, who was her in the movie.
The hippie guy who is with her?
Strange hippie guy. Well, I'm still in touch with, strangely enough.
Oh.
Would come and sort of handle her and be her love interest, basically, fake love interest.
Yeah.
But basically, he kind of made sure she got to the pool, and sometimes he'd have to carry her down there.
Yeah.
I wasn't there full time for that stuff, but when we were shooting, I was doing the audio. So, but I was not really involved creatively at that point. The film basically turned into Edie's autobiography in a strange way. It was biographical. It was, you watched her destruction happen right in front of you.
Yeah. Because I always wondered that, because I had read the book, and so I knew a bit about her background, and that seemed to be the case in the movie. What Susan was talking about as a character seemed to be her own life. Her father's sexual advances on her, her brothers dying, two committing suicide, or one possibly suicide. And it seemed to be really her talking about her own life.
Fuzzy was really a destructive, and he destroyed his own family.
Yeah. Now, we've talked about her father. I actually want to go back to your father, because your father's in the movie, again, is Mr. Verdecchio. So how did he, well, you talked about earlier, you were making the film and he got involved, and I'm thinking, he was the mayor of Great Neck at one point, wasn't he? So this must have been, what did he make of all this? Because he has a lot of screen time in the film. What did he make of the craziness?
But, my father, underneath his very legit persona, there was I think I inherited from him the desire to be in theater and film and entertainment. He really enjoyed being in the movie. He thought it was a kind of a very interesting thing. Unfortunately, I thought his voice, the original voice, my father's voice, was dubbed out, and that's the voice of somebody else, right?
Okay, I wondered that. That's okay. Yeah, I'd always wondered, is that his real voice? It's a very strange voice.
Strange voice. It really didn't fit my father, but those are my father's words, but said by this creepy guy. I don't remember what his name was, but David Rocca. We used to call David Neusman Rocca. Rocca said, "Oh, well, we're going to get this new, I'm going to dub this new voice in." But my father sort of really enjoyed playing Mr. Verdecchio, the leader of the mob, sort of big underground power figure. And, now look here, young man, let me say this about that. You're just a wart on the ass of progress. Talking to those people in the movie. He was that way. He was really sort of an interesting guy. We did some really interesting shooting. I don't know how much of it got in the movie. I don't really recollect, but we had him out on a boat in the Hudson River, and I was in the helicopter. I flew under the bridge, and he was sitting there on the bow of the boat.
Yeah.
And then he rocked his old Mercedes back in the coast, out in Great Neck in the snow.
Because there's the filming, there's the filming in California, but there's that bit at the end in the Poconos as well. Right. Was that location? Now, his driver, are you in the film? I've always wondered if you were the driver.
In one scene, and I don't even remember if it's still in, when we found Paul America, and Allegan, who was in jail. Right, he was busted for pot.
Yeah,
and he Allegan County Jail. And we made arrangements with the jailers, with the government, because it was a small town, that we would film him in the pokey. And they had a jail that they hadn't used in a couple of years was closed. And they put Paul in there, and I was his cellmate. in that scene.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just rewatched the film the other day for the first time in quite a while. Really enjoyed it, and I know the scene you mean because I'd wondered if so he really was that was shot in a real prison. Wow. Okay, I would never have thought that. Wow, that's incredible.
We went to any lengths to finish this movie. I tell you, Rocco just would not be put off. I had already moved on to my world of music. As I say, the open arms of electronica. And, I was busy doing stuff with Stevie Wonder during some of this stuff. I was already at Media Sound. I was already, working on music of my mind and stuff with Stevie. I was living in a different reality. Somehow I managed to save myself. But a lot of those people are gone now. They didn't save themselves.
Huh. So the film, you finished the film and released it in '72. What was the initial reaction to the film upon release?
Oh, we got some pretty good reviews, as I recollect. And Rocco was basically the one who was involved in overseeing the remains of Ciao Manhattan. And he went on to do other films. He produced Kiss of the Spider Woman.
Oh, wow.
Filmmaker. David was Rocco, as I call him, Rocco. He's a very talented filmmaker in his own right. Great graphic artist, spoke 4 languages. He's brilliant. And right now I'm working on my book. And I often wish that he was still around to relate the stories of our days with Ciao. It was the time of our lives. We did change the world with that movie. I can't believe to this day how much of an effect it's had on the culture.
Now, in 1982, the Gene Stein, George Plimpton book, Edie, was released. I'm assuming that gave the film a whole new audience. Was that the case?
Yes.
Yeah. I know it was reissued at the time, and a soundtrack came out a few years ago, but it's incredible how the legacy of the film has gone on, and now there's a new project, which isn't related to Ciao Manhattan, yet in some ways it's part of the legacy of Ciao Manhattan. Would you say that's fair?
Yes.
And how did you come to be involved in this project with Kinga Syrek?
Kinga reached out to me on Facebook about a year and a half ago. And she is the keeper of Conversations with Edie Sedgwick, which is a Facebook site.
Mm-hmm.
Active, very active. And a lot of people go there. There's a lot of photography. There are a lot of still pictures that I shared with Edie on set with her and my antics too during that time. And we struck up quite a great friendship. And I've been working on her getting this film of hers together for about a year now. And now today will be the last day of mixing of the soundtrack. And it has original new music, but sort of based on the times. And she's done a beautiful job. It's done all with animation. It's the first animated Edie Sedgwick movie ever. And it's done in a very unique style. And I've been pleased to design and oversee the production of the soundtrack. Full effects and full music, original music, and snippets of dialogue lifted from some of the Edie's past movies to help tell a story. And it really is the story of her rejection, first major rejection of her by her father first and then by Andy. Because when she came to do Ciao Manhattan, she had left the factory. Andy was busy with his next superstar.
Because my feeling, she wasn't even, her and Andy were kind of a thing for about less than a year, and then it was over.
Right.
Yeah.
And very frankly, Andy was the prime watcher. He was the one who watched all the car accidents, basically. He's the one who slowed down. And he actually encouraged the car accidents so he could film them. And there's a picture of photograph I've just seen recently of Andy coming up out of a manhole cover, out of a sewer, with Edie standing outside with Chuck Wine. I think
I know the picture well.
Well, it was really fair. I marveled at it a few weeks ago. I said, that's really the truth. Andy really did come out of a sewer. He really destroyed and aided and abetted the destruction of so many people in the name of his own art. And I think he's a despicable human being. He might be a great artist, but he was really a loser in the long run.
Well,
he was so destructive.
That's sometimes the case. Is I may like the art, but the art and the person are two different entities.
This is true. I mean, take a look at Phil Spector.
Yeah.
Case in point.
Case in point. So next year is the 50th anniversary of Ciao Manhattan. Do you have anything planned to mark this occasion or anything in the works?
No, I think I just order in and have some dinner.
Well, at least there is a new film. So I'll finish with one final question. Again, here we are. Edie's been dead 50 years. We're still talking about her. A new film is being made. What do you think it is about Edie that she has such an enduring legacy that successive generations keep finding and being fascinated by her?
She is a true, in the Greek sense of theater, she is the true epitome of tragedy, of the destruction of something beautiful and fragile. When I first met her, she was absolutely on fire. She was just glowing. And then you look at the color footage and you see what drugs and alcohol did to her as a human being. It destroyed her. And she did it to herself. No one forced her to drink or use, but she found the tremendous escape in it from her father and then from Andy's rejection of her. I think there were other things that were going on as well. There were romances, that went on in the city with, I think something happened with Bob Dylan for a second. There was other romantic interludes, but Edie lost herself. And unfortunately, in a way, I feel that I was partially responsible in helping enable that. It was not what I really had in mind to do. But I look back on that time and I realized what an effect the film had. And I hope and pray that the film's lessons are learned by the next generation, by people like you too, who understand what happened and how we can change people and change for the better. I think it's a lesson that we all need to learn. And I think Edie was the teacher of that, unconsciously. But she showed us the way of what could have been a tremendously beautiful world. And she just burned her own house down. That's the story. Here I am 50 years later, still making records. I'm still standing. I'm 80 years old. Still being in the studio on a daily basis.
Nice.
Taking dogs to the park, working consistently, sober, together, and looking back on it, writing a book about those adventures right now.
Is the book about those? Is it about your life, those adventures? Could you just talk about the book a little bit you're writing?
Yeah, it's a book about me discovering what drove me forward in music. It's about the original, my original trips in the East Village, meeting all the tastemakers at La Mama and Naxos, Kansas City, and Jefferson Airplane at the opening what was the Yiddish language theater, becoming the Fillmore East, living the whole drug culture, the underground life in New York, the Silver 60s, experiencing those, growing, evolving, changing, discovering electronic music, moving through my life story, where I came from. It's basically a biblical about me and the times, my life and times, and sort of moving through the underground in New York and my experiences. Some of the stuff that we talked about here are covered in that time.
Excellent. Well, I'll certainly be reading when you're done. It's going to be fascinating because, I mean, as you said, right up to today, you've had a really incredible life with so many different experiences that have had, impact on the arts and lives and that sort of thing. So very interesting.
Well, I'm glad that God put me down here to do it. I think that God has had his hand on my shoulder. Somehow I always tend to seem to land on my feet, even at the end of some really unmitigated, unplanned disasters of one time or another. Somehow I see some light in whatever I do. I just want to keep walking toward the light and to do good and to help us as a society to live forward, to move forward. I find what's been going on in our government to be so horrifying. I just can't believe it. I understand it, but I thought, that in the 60s in Vietnam and all of that stuff, I remember those times. And I thought we were past all of this. And here I just see it flowering with these ultra-right guys, the Proud Boys and all this stuff. And I really begin to wonder, why is this happening again? I mean, with Stevie, he wrote a song about Nixon calling he's Mr. Know-It-All. And I thought that was really a powerful statement. But now we have people who are invading the Capitol and fences and riot police. And it's just amazing to see this. And I have to look back on Ciao Manhattan and Edie and say it was gentler times. It was equally as cool, but in a different way, I guess. Yeah. There were good things that happened. We made tremendous strides in music and art. Edie was certainly a part of that and helped propel us forward. So,
part of me that has to be an optimist is hoping that maybe some light will come out of this darkness somehow.
I hope, and that's what I work for as a creative. Yeah. I try to bring the message of peace and grace to the table. The rest of it is not that important. There's got to be a big higher power, a bigger plan. You look out at the universe, and Elon doing his stuff. As a matter of fact, I've been working with some electronic music. A lot of it's played on the Falcon 9 space launches, electronic music.
Oh, wow.
Working with a group called Test Shot Starfish. They make all the electronic music for Falcon 9 for the rocket launches down in Florida. And it seems to me when you look out at the universe and you look at all the different planets and how Jupiter looks and how Mars looks, they're all beautiful and they're all different. That this just cannot be something that's random. The universe is not as random as we think it is. I think we live inside of something that's much more highly organized than we know. We're just not even an eye blink in time on this planet. And I just want to make sure that I leave something good for the next generation. And I think that's really what the purpose of art is. And that's what I'm doing, a day at a time. There are a lot of people falling by the wayside now. Here I am, 80 years old, just got my first COVID shot, though. I think I'm going to be here for a minute. My brother just turned 91, so I figure I'm going to be around here for a minute or two. And I just want to touch the world with some goodness. That's really what it's about. I think Edie's story is a tremendous lesson learned. And I'm glad to see that it still makes contact, that you are interested in seeing it. It's just not a bunch of toilet paper, but left something with some meaning that would change the course of your life too,
Well, certainly just looking back at the work that you've done with Stevie and production and the film. I mean, you've done a lot that has touched people very positively. You've certainly left an imprint that's never going to go away. You know, we were out in terms of the music, the electronic music. Just in the 70s, when I heard those Stevie Wonder albums as they were coming out, the electronics on them, there had been electronic music, but the way it was used so musically and also dramatically, like for instance, that bit in the middle of Living for the City with the synths, I'd never heard that before. That was completely new. It was a new expression, and it really impacted me to hear it. Same with seeing the film, Ciao Manhattan. This has been part of my life since the early 80s, and I've rewatched it many times, and I know many people from my life and my period feel the same way. So you can continue to go on from here, but you have really left your imprint, and I'm so pleased to see that this is still a driving force for you to do good and be creative. That's wonderful.
Yeah, I think it's, life is tragic, life is magic.
Yeah.
I think
agree.
We just have to take it a day at a time. I try not to think too much about the future. When I think too much about the future, where I'm going or what's going to happen next, it fucks up my now.
I know what you mean, especially in these dark times. But you have to have some optimism. I have this feeling that somehow we're going to rescue ourselves.
I feel a lot better these last couple of months with our government turning around and showing some empathy for people. And they're just next door to my house. Was an empty commercial space, which they're turning into a food bank right now called the Hollywood Harvest Food Bank. And I'm happy to see, people reaching out to take care of one another. I'm happy to see empathy and concern and civility return to our lives. And I think that we've had a pretty bumpy ride for 4 years. And I'm just glad that maybe this will spur us on to some better things. I know that communications have changed forever because of what we're able to do now, like with Zoom, which we're doing right now. All of this has changed the way we make music, for example, because now everyone's listening to music on what you have on your head right now, headphones, right? We communicate with headphones. We communicate remotely. It changes the way people conceive of art and how they perform it and how we listen to it. And the medium is changing the message once again. It started back when I started playing the synthesizer. The synthesizer was really basically the Moog especially took the synthesizer out of the realm of a music lab at Columbia or in the radiographic workshop in London, where it was bleeping and blooping for science fiction films and stuff, and created a musical instrument that could be used by an artist. And you didn't have to be a scientist to make it happen. And it gave, with Stevie, we really developed the interface as a musician and the synthesizer coming together as an entity. And that changed the face of pop music because we're able to manipulate the electronic, and now we take it for granted. And say, people, oh, well, I'm having a hard time because of Zoom. How am I going to, I can't go in the studio and be with somebody. And the guy says, one of my clients, Chris Direct, he says to me, he says, well, I really like Zoom. And I said, why? And he said, well, normally when I come to the studio, I sit in the back and I see the back of your head for 4 hours while you're busy at the console working on the music. You turn around once in a while and we talk, and I yell because of the music, being on the speakers and stuff. And he said, now that we're doing a lot of our sessions on Zoom, I get to see your face. I get to see you right there. Yeah. There you are, yeah. Right? I'm not looking at the back of your head. I'm looking at you. So it affects the way we communicate with one another. It brings us a different kind of familiarity.
Well, thank you, Robert, so much for taking the time to speak with me today. This, as I said, Edie's been a fascination of mine. Your film has long been a fascination. So it was personally really exciting for me to be able to talk to you and ask you questions about the film. Not to mention that you're involved in the new project, Too Late, by Kinga Syrek, and also your book sounds very interesting. Definitely I'll be reading that when it's out. So thank you once again for taking this time. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome, and if there's anything else I can do to be of service to you, I think that you as a storyteller is important to pass the knowledge on. If there's something I can do to be of further service, please do not neglect to give me a call.
Great. Thank you very much for that. If I think of something, I will. Thanks once again. Really appreciate it. Great. Good luck with the project. Bye-bye.